As many of you already understand, the Anunnaki are the extraterrestrial civilization generally responsible for the alteration of your genetic structure from what you would call the natural hominid that existed on your planet called Homo erectus to the idea of now what you call yourselves to be Homo sapien. In altering the genetic structure by including some of the Anunnaki DNA, they allowed you to create or exist in its present form, the human being, as you call yourselves, so that they would have a relationship to the Anunnaki, to be utilized in a variety of ways in that relationship, as workers, as companions, in a variety of ways, for their purposes of visiting your world, which fundamentally was to aid and assist them in mining minerals, gold in particular, that would allow them to alter the weather patterns of their own planet and make adjustments in that way to their energy fields. Now, the group of Anunnaki that actually visited your world, that was originally consigned to find those minerals and bring them back to the home world, were actually, to begin with, assigned to simply do this task themselves. Eventually, they found that this was something that was relatively difficult for them to do on their own, and so they believed they needed what you would call a workforce in order to aid and assist them. And knowing that there was a natural indigenous being upon the planet that was similar in form to them, they understood that they could genetically alter it to aid and assist them in this way by upgrading it, so to speak, to something more similar to their own form, and thus, by creating that force, allow that force to work in the mines to extract the gold and other minerals that they require, eventually also developing a long-term relationship with them in a variety of ways, even to the point of companionship many, many years after that. Now, this began somewhere around 500,000 of your years ago in the general areas that you call the Middle East and the African continent. And those branches of the hominid species that were not altered genetically by the Anunnaki evolved on their own in parallel to the human beings on your planet that the Anunnaki had created. And those that were not altered eventually evolved into the form you now call Sasquatch. So the idea is that if you had not been altered at all, today you would all be Sasquatch. But because you were altered, because you were evolved in that way, you became human beings. This also allowed for certain kinds of incarnational experiences to happen that would be very different than the incarnational experiences of Sasquatch, or Yeti, or Bigfoot, or whatever you wish to call that branch of your cousins. Now, they evolved in a very natural way, which allowed them to have a much closer connection in many ways to the idea of nature, and allowed them to develop abilities and skills that you do contain, but in a sense have forgotten that you have because of the alteration. Their abilities and skills as Sasquatch allow them to actually enter interdimensional states, passing from parallel reality to parallel reality, different dimensions to different dimensions, which is why they are so difficult to find on your planet when they don't want to be found. Nevertheless, getting back to your story, the branch that you became, eventually there were also interminglings between some of the humans of the time and the Anunnaki on the world, and these created births, natural births of beings that you have in your legends come to call the so-called demigods and so forth. Now, the Anunnaki were much taller in general than you are, and some of the earlier races on your planet of humanity were also much taller than most of you, although you are regaining not only your height again, but also your longevity, because in times past, a lot of the genes were passed along to the human beings that were genetically created that allowed them to live for hundreds of years, because the Anunnaki lived for thousands of years. The idea is that you are regaining this ability again. The genetic material is being opened up again because of new vibrations that are now existing in this present day on your planet, allowing you more longevity, allowing you greater height, greater health, greater vitality. And you are opening up those connections energetically to the Anunnaki and those genetic materials that you contain. Now, of course, the Anunnaki themselves also contained a mixture of different genetics from different races. We will not get into that so much right now, although you can certainly understand, we will give you a little bit of a sneak preview, that one of these was what is called on that diagram the Proto-Sapiens. We will get into them another time. But you could say that in general, the Proto-Sapiens are the precursors of all the human forms in your galaxy. Now, the Anunnaki, the branch that was on your planet and creating the idea of the Homo sapien groupings, were actually just a branch. And in their original assignment, were not really supposed to tinker with the genetics of the planet. When the main council of Anunnaki discovered that they had done so and created a new intelligent race of beings, well, let's just say they weren't very happy about it. They actually recalled that Anunnaki contingent from the Earth, and in many ways left you to your own devices, allowing you to grow on your own, to evolve on your own, with some degree of guidance from them, because they felt responsible in allowing that contingent of Anunnaki to create you. They felt responsible to guide you to some degree, although it was not the original plan. And so again, the stories of visitations over time, again from the idea of angels and gods from the sky, leading and guiding and teaching in a variety of ways to allow you to grow into your own civilization and allow you to take over some of the cities that had been created and become the actual kings of old, although the Anunnaki bloodline still coursed strongly in their veins. You see this in the representation of the ancient 10 kings of Atlantis, in Lemurian times, and even into relative modern times, as you still remember Egypt as having kings, and then eventually the idea of pharaohs. But all this goes back to the concept of the blue bloods, the royal lines, and everything that created the concept of royalty on your planet, because it is traced all the way back to the idea of the Anunnaki, who actually were slightly bluishly tinged. So the blue blood line was looked upon as the purest line in that way, although of course you all contain Anunnaki genetics. But there might be here and there some that are more directly related in direct lineages to some of those ancient genes. Now, once that began to happen, and you had on your planet contingents of humans who were creating their own civilizations, mostly guiding themselves with a little bit of input here and there from extraterrestrial beings and extra-dimensional beings, teaching them how to open up their consciousness to tap into source, to draw down and download information from a variety of sources, then eventually humanity was pretty much left on its own in that way to evolve to a certain point to see if they would arrive at a point where they could then reconnect with the idea of extraterrestrial beings, extra-dimensional beings, which would show that they evolved to a point where the next stage of evolution could occur. As has been often said, you are shifting your frequencies from one reality level to another, and this is so. But you are always shifting. You are shifting now. It is a natural thing that you do. You don't have to wait to shift. You've been shifting. You've been shifting all your lives. This is the way motion is created. This is what happens when you create the illusion of movement. The only way to create the illusion of movement is to actually shift from parallel reality to parallel reality that's slightly different than the reality you were in before. So you're shifting now, you're shifting now, you're shifting now, you're shifting now, you're shifting now. Through constantly shifting parallel realities. The idea is that you don't notice this so much because each new reality you shift to is very similar to the one you were existing in before. The idea of noticing the change is to create there to be a bigger difference between the parallel reality you shift to and the one that you were in before. That's when you know you're shifting. That's when you reveal to yourselves that you're always constantly shifting, and that learning to shift is not something you have to do. You do it automatically. You do it by your own second nature. It is natural to you to shift. This is the nature of how reality works. This is the nature of how change exists. So the question is not, can you shift? The question is, what will you shift to? And how different will you allow the shift to be based on your definitions and your belief systems of what you believe is possible for you? And this is why it is of paramount importance, as has been said this day, for you to really focus on the idea of the frequency, the vibrational frequency, the state of being that you prefer your reality to be, and thus then understand, based on what we have just said about shifting to parallel Earth realities, that when you change the vibration of your being, it's not that you change the world. It's that you take yourself, you shift yourself to a parallel Earth already existing on the vibratory level you have created within yourself. So it's not about having to force anyone else to change. It's only about you changing and taking yourself to whatever reality, whatever parallel Earth is representative of the vibrational frequency you have created within your own state of being. And thus then find yourself surrounded by other beings who already populate that world, but are already more representative of the vibrational frequency you have created yourself to shift to. Is this making some sense to you? All right. The idea here, again, is that this is simple physics. As many of your scientists are beginning to realize, everything exists all at once, all now, in a sense, all here. But you create the illusion of separation by creating differences in vibrational frequency. As each and every one of you goes to your homes this day of your time, after these interactions, many of you may sit down on one of your couches, you may pick up one of your remotes, you may turn on one of your television sets, and your TV set technology is a perfect analogy of what we are talking about. The idea is that you know that at any given moment, there are any number of dozens of television programs that are available to you at that moment that all coexist simultaneously. But you will only get the program that you tune your channel to. This is exactly how physical reality is holographically structured. Whatever vibrational realm you exist on, whatever state of vibrational being you choose to be, is the reality you get. What you put out is what you get back. Simple physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Simple physics. That's all this is. It's about creating the appropriate state that you prefer in your own being and allowing reality, in a sense, to reflect back to you the shift you have made in yourself. But you must understand that the opposite is also true. You cannot perceive what you are not the vibration of. If you tune your television set, to use this analogy further, to what you call your channel 2, you will not receive the program on channel 4. You have to tune your set to channel 4 to get that program. Likewise, based on the reality you say you prefer, if you do not allow yourself in your definitions, in your emotions, in your thoughts and actions and behaviors in life to exemplify the vibratory reality that you say you prefer to live in, then you will not be actually capable of perceiving any opportunities that could actually allow you to synchronistically get yourself, shift yourself to that reality. Remember, what you are not the vibration of remains invisible to you. Many times individuals wonder, why can't I do this? Why can't I get there? Why doesn't this happen? It may simply be an issue of that they are on a frequency, operating in a frequency domain that creates certain opportunities to remain invisible to them, unknowable to them, unimaginable to them. They will never even conceive of those ideas, nor recognize them even if they were right in front of their face, because they're not operating on that level. You have to be in the state to see the opportunities and the doorways that actually lead to that reality. This is, again, simple physics. It is a very, very, very simple concept, a very fundamental concept, but we understand that many people on your planet seem to have a lot of difficulty in relating to this idea and creating the kind of changes within themselves that they say they want to make. This all simply comes down to the notion of definitions, how you define your reality, belief systems, basically, is what we are talking about. Because you do not have, you cannot have an actual experiential reality except as is based upon the strongest thing you believe it can be. The strongest way you define your relationship to it and to yourself. All experiences in life are based upon, in your physical reality, in your physical dimension, all experiences are based upon the strongest definition you have bought into about that reality. There have been many, many discussions about the different kinds of realities that your probable futures may hold. And I say this, as has been said, they are simply probable futures. Nothing is set in stone, nothing is chiseled in steel. You have the wherewithal to understand that these are simply a function of the probabilities, that there is no the future. There are many, many, many possible futures. The idea, as we have just explained it, is whatever vibratory realm you exist in, whatever state of being you decide is true for you, will be, generally speaking, the future, so to speak, you will experience. And even if there are other people who think completely oppositely, who believe completely opposite of you, they will have their reality experience as well. The idea, again, is that you don't have to change your world. You simply need to shift to a world that's already representative of the change you wish to experience, and allow those that wish to remain in the vibrational world that they have been in to remain there, because that Earth will exist as well, and does exist right now. All these parallel realities exist right now, at the same time, just like the television programs. So, to further stretch the analogy, what this all comes down to, by using the analogy of your TV program, is to understand it all comes down to transformational vibration, TV. All right? That's what you're dealing with, transformational vibrations, TV. You decide what TV show you're going to experience. But you have to tune to that channel, or you will not be capable of seeing that particular TV show you say you desire to see. Does this make sense?
I want to do amazing things in this life.
Then do them. Nothing is stopping you.
That's my question. What I want...
What you want?
What I want, the platform that I want to be able to use my creativity and my life purpose.
What you prefer to do, how you prefer to express yourself?
Yes, and I would like to be sustained financially.
Why wouldn't you be?
That's my question.
Do you understand what we mean when we talk about the idea of the formula and the complete kit of excitement and how it works? Or do you need a refresher?
Oh, okay.
So that means no, you don't understand it.
I would like clarity on...
All right, here are the 11 elements. Are you ready?
Okay.
The first part contains 3 elements. Number 1, you act on anything that contains more excitement than anything else, any other option. Number 2, to the best of your ability, taking it as far as you can until you can take it no further. Number 3, with absolutely zero insistence or assumption on what the outcome ought to be. 1, 2, 3. That's the first part of the formula. The next part is the toolkit. And when you use that 3-part formula of acting on your highest excitement to the best of your ability with no insistence on a particular outcome, you activate the kit, which contains everything you need to be supported in your life, no matter in what form it may come. It becomes the driving engine of your life that moves you forward through life. It becomes the organizing principle in your life that demonstrates through synchronicity exactly what you need to do, when you need to do it, with whom you need to do it, where you need to do it. It becomes the path of least resistance in your life that allows you to flow through your life in the easiest possible way. It becomes the path that connects to all other expressions of your excitement that are in alignment with your true vibration. Even though they may all look very different, it's the excitement that tells you they're connected, not how they look on the surface. And the final tool, it is the reflective mirror that reveals to you anything within your unconscious mind that might be out of alignment with your excitement, so that you can make it conscious, redefine it, and add its energy to the momentum of your excitement. Once that kit is working for you in that way, the only thing left to do is that when any circumstance or situation arises based on the actions you've taken with your excitement, whatever they may be, You then have the choice in the face of that circumstance to define it positively and get a beneficial effect, or define it negatively and get a negative effect. That's it. So when you say, I want to do this, I want to be financially supported, if you understand the kit, the mechanism, how it works, how this formula works, what you really are saying is, I prefer to act on my highest excitement to the best of my ability with no insistence on a particular outcome, because if I do, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt I will be supported in whatever form of abundance is actually most synchronous, most representative of the path of least resistance. No matter how it looks, it is the correct form. And I will not insist on my abundance appearing only in one form, because I know that if I do, I'm actually closing the door through which other forms of abundance might come. And therefore, whatever circumstance or situation crops up when I take these actions, knowing that the kit is serving and supporting me in the way that it needs to, may not always be the way my ego wants it to, but I know it's the way that I need it to be most representative of who I am, then I will always choose to define the circumstance that arises therefrom in the most positive way possible, because that's what I prefer. And it doesn't matter how the situation may have been generated, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about it. It doesn't matter what anyone else's opinion is in that circumstance. I choose that every circumstance that crops up from my actions serves me in a positive way. And then I know that even if I can't always fathom exactly how that's going to look, it's always going to work out to my benefit, period. That's the equation. That's how it works. It works flawlessly for everyone, including you. It's always working. It's just that many of you may be filling it with definitions that are out of alignment with who you truly are, and therefore it seems to not be working. But in fact, it's actually working by churning out circumstances and situations that are completely representative of the definitions that you feed it. So negative definition in, negative experience out. It seems to not be working, but it is. It's supporting your negative definition. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So if the mechanism is capable of supporting your negative definitions, it is certainly capable of supporting the positive ones. It's up to you to decide how you want to use the machine, how you want to use the tools. You can pick up a hammer and you can say, I'm going to drive this nail into the board. But if you're using the wooden end of the hammer, it's going to be quite a bit more challenging. When you understand how to use the tool, you'll turn the hammer around, hit the nail on the head, and in one stroke, it's in the board. So, if it's taking more than one or a few strokes, that's your first clue you're using the wrong end of the hammer. Turn it around. Understand the mechanism. Have a clearer definition of the mechanism, and you will see that it is working for you, but it's working for you in a way you don't prefer, because that's what you're feeding it.
Say, how are you all this day and time as you create time to exist? Let's get serious. S-I-R-I-U-S. That may be your entitlement tonight if you wish. Let's get serious. The idea being, on behalf of a request made last week of your time to discuss the third part of the triad of your world, our world, and the world that orbits the star you call Sirius, to illuminate some of the idea of the energy of the beings that exist in that particular stellar system of awareness. We have discussed from time to time with you the idea that there are different levels of consciousness, as you call it, some of which in your terminology exist in physiological manner, some of which exist in non-physiological manner, more in what you would call etheric state of dimensionality, energy state of consciousness. The idea of the triad of energy represented by your planet of Earth, our planet of Ethasani, and the civilization around Sirius we have labeled Siskine, will be representative of the body, mind, and spirit of an overall consciousness that together our three civilizations form. Not that you do not belong, not that we do not belong to other triads, other patterns, other interactive levels of consciousness as well. But this one particular triad has a lot to do with the definitions of the route, shall we say, that you are taking in your upward spiral, in your ascension, in your acceleration of awareness within yourself. It is, to some degree, more directly representative of manifestations reflected back to you of your own higher consciousness in many ways. Even though they are beings unto themselves, there is an affinity, a connection, a link between the energy of the star system Sirius and your own Earth in many different ways. Now, Sirius civilization have contacted your planetary civilization for quite some time, thousands of your years as you count time. But something that we have not completely discussed before in specific detail is that they have interacted with your civilization from many different levels. For they have had, in what you call the past, a more physiological counterpart that to some degree, not only telepathically, but in your terminology, somewhat physiologically interacted with some of you from time to time in your past civilizations, your past cultures upon your planet. Now, we have at one time described as you, your world is, in your terms, third planet from our sun, and our world, Ethasani, is third planet from our sun. We have also to some degree said that the planet, the world, that is represented by the Sirius consciousness is also third, in a sense, from the sun, but not third in the same way, not spatially, dimensionally. For there are three levels of the civilization of Sirius, one that you would call fourth density, one that you would call fifth density, and the one to some degree you may be most familiar with through these interactions, the sixth density level, that is called Siskine, where they are totally non-physical, as you would understand physicality, and exist more or less in what you would call an energy state, an energy sea. Now, their ancient fourth density representative cells, to some degree, were, as many of your ancient cultures perceived them, amphibious, but not exactly to the degree that they were described in some of what you call your ancient American Indian, your ancient African, and your ancient Sumerian lore. They were not, in your terms, literally half fish, as has been described in some of the deifications that your planet has created of them to represent them by. But they were understood to some degree to be of somewhat amphibious nature in that sense. And that is why, among many other reasons, there is such a strong state of identification between the Sirius civilization and the civilization on your planet you call the dolphins and the whales, and why they have been in telepathic communication for many thousands of your years. They are similar in energy format in many ways, and while the physiological configuration of the old fourth density Sirius civilization was not like your dolphin and whale civilization, their energy was sufficient to cause what you would call a camaraderie, an empathy, an identification to take place. And so their communications have been ongoing for quite some time, even while the land human civilization on your planet has been waking up from its deep sleep of forgetfulness. Now, some of those interactions that took place here and there, to some degree, are responsible for some of the representations of cultural, religious, political, economic ideas that manifested and blossomed upon your planet. We do not wish to impart the idea or impression that extraterrestrials are completely responsible for the entire idea of your cultural phenomena, sociological phenomena. No. But some interaction has taken place and has created, in your terminology, changes in the course of how you saw events as a society. Because none of you are original to your planet anyway, many of you have, all of you have connections of the sort to other dimensions, other levels of existence. And some of these were simply established from time to time in various modalities. But as the Sirius civilization progressed and accelerated, in your terms, evolution took place. They transformed from the physical fourth density state into a more quasi-physical, non-physical fifth density state, and then into a completely non-physical sixth density state. But to some degree, because all realities exist in a sense at the same time, all interactions on all levels are still taking place, especially because in your civilization you are still awakening out of third density into your own fourth density manifestation. Now, the Sirius civilization does represent, to some degree, our own higher consciousness. They are representative of the evolution my civilization is most directly headed for as we move into the idea of fifth density from our fourth density existence, the last stage of physicality. As you are moving into that last stage of fourth density physicality, and eventually will, in a sense, take our place in the triad. We will take their place in the triad. They will move on to another idea altogether, and then another member, another civilization, will then, in your terms, fill your, as you say, shoes in the triad. Now, we have said that most likely, not definite, but most likely this will be a civilization within the star grouping you call Barnard star cluster. They are approximately, this civilization, now at a point equivalent to what you would call your Renaissance in historical terms. Now, the Sirius civilization is much again in an energy sea. They are in a state of complete consciousness. If you wish any kind of a representation of their world as such, you can perhaps give this physiological analogy. Imagine a ball of clear light, clear energy on the surface. And as you sink slowly into it, it becomes white energy. And the more you go toward the center, it then condenses and collapses into what you would call a bright electric blue electromagnetic energy. And at the very center is what you would typically call a black hole gate. Now, this idea of their existence, existing as energy forms in an energy sea, allows them to either project themselves telepathically as individuals or as one homogeneous energy, one homogeneous consciousness. And to some degree, it can be said, technically speaking, that they do this projection and communication with other civilizations, that black hole gate at the very center of their world. It is an interdimensional gate that links to all levels, all dimensions, and through which they can communicate in either direction with any level, any dimension. This idea now has allowed them, this gate now has allowed them to, as you say, step up. Their ability to communicate with many of you, now that you as a civilization have stepped up, your ability to receive the idea of what you would call higher frequencies, higher vibrations. May I take a moment to remind you once again, biological life is the most efficient transmitter and receiver. So, recognize that as each and every one of you, in your own way, in your own time, decide to open yourself up to more expressiveness of the consciousness that you are, more recognition and expressiveness of the frequency that you are, you will become more sensitized to the frequency they are always bathing, beaming your world in. Because they are always sending an unbroken radiation of unconditional love and energy, thought form, thought patterns, for you to tap into in that sense. Now, approximately in your terms of physical counting, that star, their star you call Sirius, is within what you would call 10 approximately of your light years. In your terminology, in your physical dimension, it takes 10 of your years, 10 of your orbits, for a beam of light to reach from your star to their star, from their star to your star. But understand that the telepathic link is instantaneous, that what you call the black hole gate circumvents physiological space, connects all dimensions in the immediate here and now, and through that gate, it is as if they literally overlap you. Literally overlap you, are intertwined with you, even in much the same way that we are, and all civilizations, and all dimensions are intertwined holographically with each other. Each and every one of you, and each and every being, has that same central gate, that same central black hole, in a sense, through which you can receive and send any idea, any information, can create any interaction. And so, you can always be aware when you are in a very energized and balanced and relaxed and ecstatic state. Be aware of all the frequencies, all the spectrum of energy and information that is always available for any of you to ride the crest of that wave. Always. Identification with their very high energy can assist in your acceleration, but it is not that they are doing it for you. You must meet them halfway. In a sense, that is where we come in, for we are to some degree representative of the halfway vibration between you and them. We are the band, in a sense, of mentality, of electromagnetic energy, of consciousness that represents what you are to some degree becoming, what you are headed for in your civilization. We are, in that sense, by allowing identification to take place between our civilizations, reflecting to you your own self-chosen future, in a sense. Not that it will be specifically as we have chosen to express our civilization. You will create your own version of it, but the energy, the pattern, the identification will be very similar. And then, once again, as you then move to the stars, open to the stars, you will literally be flowing, sliding on starlight, using light itself for all that you need, all your power, all your understanding, recognizing that light is the matrix in which all information that you need is intertwined and interlocked. And when you open that light by shining as a brilliant star yourself, you will then match the frequency of all of creation's light and know everything you need to know right now, as you are. You are made of light. So when you lighten up and don't be so serious, then you too will reflect the serious nature of their consciousness and your own higher self and fuller self. We thank you for having such a interesting language to play around with. There will be more in what you would call the near future of communication directly from Sirius energy, as there has been from time to time in your past, through these interactions. But as changes occur and expansions occur, also accordingly, will its energy reflect those changes and expansions.
Now, we are going to cover more of the ideas I'm about to speak about in what you call tomorrow's transmission as well. But we're going to lay some foundations here and now for that. The next thing we would like to bring up in connection and in conjunction with this idea of permission slips is how to allow this concept to sink in more deeply and how to form a relationship more clearly and more consciously with what many of you have for a long time called your higher self. This mysterious higher self. Where is it? Don't know. Is he up there? Is she over there? Don't know. How high? This high? This high? Don't know. What is the higher self? Thank you. Let's address this. So you have some definitions to work with, which again are nothing but what? Permission slips. That's all we're delivering here. Everything we say, everything we deliver to you is nothing but another form of permission slip. Take which one works for you. The ones that don't work for you, let them be. Now, let's go into a little bit more detail. Higher self. All right. Most of you are familiar with the idea that you have a physical consciousness, a personality as a physical being that you relate to as yourself, so to speak. But then there is this mysterious idea of the higher self. Simply put, most of you understand, or at least intuit, that the so-called higher self, well, is relatively non-physical. Even more simply put, you could say that there is a vibrational frequency just above physical reality, just beyond physical reality, in which resides what you might refer to as a template for physical reality, or upon which you construct your physical experience. It is in that template level, just beyond the physical threshold, that the higher self exists. Now, please do not confuse the idea of higher self with oversoul or spirit or what have you. Higher self is a specific idea that is like a version of the person you are in physical reality, but a version that has a broader perspective, a broader point of view. It's like having a twin standing on a mountaintop while one is also standing in the valley. And they can communicate with each other. And the higher self can say, I see you walking down the road, and I see that there is, well, a little bit of a ditch up ahead, so if you walk this way and walk that way, you'll avoid it. And the one in the valley going, oh, thank you very much. This is, very simply put, the relationship between the two. It is you with a higher perspective, a broader perspective, a bigger picture, without the complications that can arise from the personality construct's belief system. So the higher self is like a guiding principle, a governing principle, so to speak, that is a part of your complex as a person, but is the non-physical component that acts as the conduit to even higher versions of your soul, of your being, of your spirit, but also acts as the intermediary between those higher levels and the physical personality construct, and can distill information from the higher spirit and soul over soul levels in a way that your personality can understand. So the higher self functions like a translator, taking the information from the higher levels and bringing it down to earth in a way that can communicate to the personality effectively. However, because of some of the belief systems that exist within the personality structure on your planet, there has been confusion as to exactly how to form a clear communication line to the higher self. So let's make something very, very clear. This may sound a little bit surprising. but that's all right. Surprises are good. There are 3 levels here in this idea. It might surprise you to know, as personality constructs, as physical minds, you do not conceive of any ideas. What do I mean? The personality does not conceive of concepts. It perceives concepts. It does not conceive them. Here are the 3 levels. The higher self conceives. The physical brain receives. The personality mind perceives. That's all it does. Any idea, any inspiration, any imagination you have ever had doesn't come from the physical mind portion of you. It comes from the higher self portion of you, through the receiver, the brain, and is translated by the brain into a vibration that the physical mind then perceives as a reflected reality. One more time, because this is crucial to understand. You don't conceive of any ideas as a physical mind. That's not what the physical mind is designed to do. It cannot create ideas. It can only perceive the result of an idea from the higher self. Now, this may sound at first somewhat limiting, but in fact, it's very, very freeing, because you can all stop thinking. You can all stop thinking you're in charge. You can all stop thinking you have to think of everything. You can all stop thinking that you're the one guiding the ship. You're not. You are just looking at the road. You're just experiencing the path that you, the whole you, is creating. But the reason you get into trouble, the reason you feel stuck as a physical mind, is because you've been taught to believe that the physical mind is the one coming up with all this stuff. And it's not. So when you try to manipulate it, it doesn't work, because the physical mind is not designed to actually create those concepts. It is only designed to perceive the effect of the creation of those concepts through the receiver, the physical brain. Now, here's also what happens. And again, this is an important distinction. Physical mind cannot perceive how something happens. It can only perceive how something happened. One more time. It's a very important distinction, and I'll explain. Physical mind does not have the capacity to perceive how something happens. It can only perceive how something happened. But because the physical mind thinks it's coming up with these things, it then takes what happened and assumes that that's how things happen. And it's not. It's only what happened that time. And it thinks, well, if I do that again, I can make this happen, I can make that happen. No. You might get some degree of repetitional success with that philosophy, but it will never go beyond the parameters of what you observed in that particular happenstance. Because what happened was designed to allow that particular thing to happen. And that particular thing doesn't necessarily require the same ingredients as something else. So when you may want something else to happen, when you may want to expand on what happened, you cannot use the same ingredients that made that happen, because then all you'll do is repeat the cycle and wonder why you're not getting anywhere. You have to allow the connection to your own higher self to be the one that will allow you to experience the reality that comes from the higher self, because the higher self is the only part of you that actually knows how things happen, because it's on the mountaintop. It has the broader perspective. It can see what's coming. It can orchestrate. You're in the valley as a physical being. From the physical perspective, your view is somewhat limited. But the idea is it doesn't matter. As we will discuss and point out, and as many of you have heard in The Secret, all you really need to do, to use the analogy they use of driving your car, is see the road just a few hundred feet ahead. You don't have to see the road all the way from your beginning to your destination. That's the higher self's point of view. So you don't have to know exactly how you're going to get there. All you need to know as the physical side of the personality mind is where you're at right now. The higher self will tell you, keep going. Turn left. Turn right. You're going to get there quicker this way. You're going to get there quicker that way. You need to stop for now. You need to take a rest. You need to take a bathroom break. Then get back in your car and keep going. That comes from the higher self portion of the total being that you are as a person, as a persona. But the physical mind aspect of the personality does not have the capacity to understand how things happen. So, stop trying to figure it out, because you never will as a physical person. Only as a higher self expression, when you are in communication and allowing that communication to occur, will you then be able to take advantage of knowing how it's going to happen, but the physical mind will not know how it's going to happen. This is using the invisible to your advantage. And this is why you talk about such things as, well, you just have to take it on faith. No, you don't. It's really about knowing and understanding the nature of your actual existence, understanding the structure of the relationship, understanding how it is you have arranged yourself as a consciousness, and then simply using it in the same way that you use a telephone, a light switch, or any other device. It's simply a matter of understanding the nature of it, and then taking advantage of using the nature of it, and using the power of the invisible, because it's very, very solid. Just because your physical mind can't perceive it, can't perceive the how of it, and how this is all happening, doesn't mean it cannot receive the benefit of how it's all happening. But in order to really do that as fully as you possibly can, you must drop the assertion and the assumption that the physical mind needs to know how everything works. Because it never, ever will. It's not designed to. And this allows you to lighten up your load, stop carrying so much baggage, stop trying to do your higher self's job, and just do your own. That's why so many of you are so tired when you are trying to do certain things in a certain way. It's because you're trying to do a job you weren't designed to do. That's exhausting. Stop. You were not hired to do that job. Your higher self already has the job, and it's working for you perfectly. Work with it. Work with it. Not against it, by trying to do the job it was designed to do. Just do the job you were designed to do, which is perceive what has happened and allow yourself to know that what has happened can be used by you to your advantage by maintaining positive meaning
from your belief system into it. Allowing yourself to do that as physical mind is what will keep the communication lines open. Acting on your passion, acting on your excitement, always putting positive meaning into whatever happens is what will keep the lines open to your higher self to receive the communication, to know that you can take the next step, and the next step, and the next step, and the next step, because whatever it is that does happen will always allow you to take the next step, no matter what it is, as long as you relate to it in the appropriate way as a physical mind, and don't attempt to relate to it in an inappropriate way as a higher mind yourself. Let the higher mind come through you and relate to it, but don't try to do the higher mind's job for it. It will always, always be difficult for you to do because you're not designed to do that. So again, higher self conceives. Physical brain receives. Physical mind perceives.